Yeah, hello everyone. So today we'll be discussing about clubfoot. So clubfoot, as we all know, is the commonest birth deformity which we see, and it's one of the commonest musculoskeletal conditions seen in a newborn. So as you can see in the picture here, the foot is inwards and upwards, right? So this is the classical clubfoot deformity. So we'll be speaking about. So I am Dr. Ratnav, consultant pediatric orthopedics at CK Bedla Hospital, Gurugram. So if we see the pathology of clubfoot, there is tightness of the structures on the inner side of the foot and the ankle, right? So as you can see here, the muscles, the tendons, the capsules, the ligaments around the medial side of the ankle, so they are extremely tight. So this basically results in the deformity. So this is a stillborn child which has a clubfoot around 17 weeks of age. So this is how the deformity looks. So this is the prenatal ultrasound. This is how the foot looks intrauterine if the ultrasound is done at around 20 weeks of age. So as you can see, the deformity is noted, and the parents are usually aware of the deformity since the second trimester of birth. This is how the real-time ultrasound looks. So even if we get to know of the deformity at such early age, we usually don't need to do anything, we just need to counsel the patient, and the treatment only starts after the birth. So there is nothing to panic about, and most of these deformities are correctable unless there is some underlying problem. So we'll be discussing about that. So this is a newborn, a day 1 child with the classical bilateral clubfoot with the inward and upward turned foot, and all the classic findings of an idiopathic clubfoot. As you can see, the child is actively moving both the limbs, the toes are moving, dorsiflexion of the toes are there. So this usually signifies that usually there shouldn't be any associated neurological problems. So this clinical examination is very important at birth. And if you go to the pathology, this red bone here is the talus. So what happens in a clubfoot is the whole of the foot, the forefoot and the midfoot, it's turned inwards and it revolves around the talar head. Right, so this is the navicular bone, right? This navicular bone turns inwards. If you go to the demography of CTEV, it is the most common congenital anomaly, as we spoke about. There is an incidence of about 1 birth per 1000 live births. So 1 in every 1000 live births will have a CTEV deformity. And in a year, approximately 1 lakh infants are born with CTEV deformity, and it's twice more likely in a male child than a female child, and it is bilateral in about 40% of cases. And most of these cases somehow are seen in in the third world countries, in the developing countries, around 80% of them. So if you go to the classification of clubfoot, it can be classified based on cause and based on treatment. So based on cause is the commonest classification which we use. It can be an idiopathic, which is the most common type, secondary, and the postural type. So idiopathic type is where clubfoot is the only deformity which is seen, and otherwise the child is completely normal. There is no associated anomalies in the child. In secondary clubfoot, there are associated anomalies of the nervous system, of the muscles, and the central nervous system. So there are other problems, there are genetic problems with the babies. So when there is an underlying problem, it is called as a secondary clubfoot. Postural clubfoot is mostly because of the lack of amniotic fluid in the third trimester of the pregnancy, due to which the foot is turned inward. But they are usually correctable, then they don't need casting, just stretching usually suffices in this age. Based on treatment, it can be a corrected clubfoot, it can be an uncorrected clubfoot. Uncorrected can be a resistant, recurrent, neglected, or a complex clubfoot. We'll be speaking about all of them individually. So idiopathic clubfoot, the commonest type, usually has associations with maternal and paternal smoking. There is an absolute risk of 2.1 to 3.6% of incidence of CTEV in a first degree relative, and it is usually more common in a primary gravida. So there is no single correlation to any particular thing, any particular risk factor to clubfoot. It's usually a multifactorial disorder, and there is no single gene which can be associated with clubfoot. So there are multiple factors which has been seen to correlate with clubfoot. So we really can't say that there is particular reason for a clubfoot can happen to anyone. Now secondary clubfoot can be a neuropathic clubfoot, can be a syndromic or a dysplastic clubfoot. So neuropathic usually have some kind of CNS disorder affecting the brain or the spinal cord, the commonest of them being the meningomyelocele and the tethered cord. Some of them may have even poliomyelitis, cerebral palsy, or a Charcot-Marie Tooth disease. So these are common causes of neuropathic clubfoot. There are some syndromic clubfoot which are more stiff, they have associated anomalies of the heart, of the intestines, the liver, the visceral organs may be abnormal in these kids, and they can be having associated life-threatening anomalies as well. So we have to rule out, and that is why we do a thorough head-to-toe examination of the kids to rule out other secondary causes of clubfoot. Now this is a photograph of a neglected clubfoot. Why do we need to treat a clubfoot? We need to treat to avoid this. Now this is a disastrous outcome of a clubfoot, a deformity which can easily be corrected at birth with minimal intervention, with minimal resources, in a much more economical way. If we don't treat, this is what the children land up with, this is what they end up with in an adult age. So as you can see, these deformity over a period of time, they further worsen, the contracture further worsens, there are associated bone anomalies, the bone deformity further increases, the soft tissue contracture further increases, and the deformity over a period of time even worsens, and ultimately the foot joints, they get arthritic, and they ultimately may become non-compliant for a shoe wear, and they also become painful. So these kids obviously cannot run, they cannot participate in sports activities, and ultimately they become a burden to the society, because these kids have difficulty earning bread and butter for themselves, they have difficulty getting married, they become they are seen as a sign of social stigma. So these are the problems, and it affects the self-esteem of the person as well when they become adult. So that is why timely intervention in a clubfoot is very important. This is a picture of a paralytic or a neuromuscular CTEV where there is a meningomyelin seal in the kip and associated clubfoot. So we coming back to the idiopathic type, this is the deformity which we see in a clubfoot, right? So as you can see here, the foot is turned inwards, so there is a hindfoot varus, the forefoot varus, the foot is turned inwards, and there is upwards. So there is a supination of the forefoot, there is forefoot adduction, there is varus of the hindfoot, there is equinus, so the heel cord is also tight. So these are the associated deformities if you want to break out the deformities into different parts, right? So it's a three-dimensional deformity, it is in multi planes, and so we need to correct all of them in a special way. This is the classification system which we use for clubfoot. So this is the Pirani classification system. We won't be going into the details of it. It's just to assess the deformity on day one, how stiff the foot will be. It helps us to prognosticate the parents that how soon can we get the correction, how many number of casts will be used, and what is the likelihood of a relapse, and what is the likelihood of a surgical intervention. So basically it helps in prognostication. Higher the Pirani scale, higher the likelihood of a recurrence and a surgical intervention and a relapse. There is another scale which we use, which is called the DiMaglio scale. But Pirani, of course, is the commonest scale which we use. So there are some changes, as I said, there are some bony changes. That means the tarsal and the metatarsal bone, they gradually get deformed over a period of time. And soft tissues, of course, as we discussed, the muscles, tendon, joint caps, all of them get tight over a period of time. So this is the pathological anatomy. I think we have already covered it. So this is a dissection of a newborn with a clubfoot. And as you can see, the tissues on the medial side, the tendons, the anterior tendons, the posterior medial tendons of the foot and ankle, they are all tight. The tibialis anterior, the extensor digitorum longus, extensor hallucis longus, they all are tight here. You can see how the tissues on the inner side of the foot are tight. So this results in the interning of the foot. And as you can see here, this is the talus bone, this is the navicular. The navicular is sitting almost, it's abutting the medial malleolus. So this is the classic deformity of a clubfoot. The ultimately results into wedge-shaped navicular, and of course the talar head also gets deformed over a period of time if untreated. So if you talk about the assessment of a clubfoot child at birth, we usually get reference at day one. So we do a complete head-to-toe examination. Of course the history is also important, whether it's a primary gravida, whether there's a first child born with clubfoot or there is a family history associated anomaly, whether it's a term baby. Now an head-to-toe examination will definitely include other anomalies. Most common of them is the problems of the hip. So DDH is another common associated problem with clubfoot. We look for the spine, if there is any associated spina bifida. If there are other limb anomalies, whether the hip, the limbs are normal of correct size, whether there is any contracture. And we of course assess the neurology of the baby. if the muscle tone, if the other nerves are functioning or not. So there are, the different things which we examine in a newborn child. So day one, we have seen the baby, what to do. The first thing we advise the parents is to start stretching. So this is the way we stretch the baby's foot, and the thumb is placed on the second bony prominence on the lateral side. The first, of course, is the fibular head. We make the parent feel those bony prominence, and we use the other hand, the index and the thumb, to gradually stretch out the deformities. So the first week, the stretching is done by the parents. So this is how the stretching is done. We then go on to the next phase of the treatment, which is the casting. Casting, of course, the gold standard in clubfoot is the Ponseti cast. Dr. Ignacio Ponseti described it way back in the 1990s from the University of Iowa. So this is how the sequence of casts goes in a clubfoot, and this is how the deformity corrects. So we'll be going to the details of the technique. So if we go to the basic principles of the clubfoot correction, we have seen that the whole foot rotates around the talar head. So our fulcrum is talar head. Never put your finger, the thumb, on the calcaneum. This green one is the calcaneum, right? So the talar head is our fulcrum. We do not put our finger on the calcaneum and the cuboid joints. So no means we do not put our fingers here. TH means the talar head. So this is our fulcrum, right? And this is how we gradually pull we first elevate the first metatarsal. So that is the supination movement which we do in the first cast. So this is how we gradually abduct the foot after the supination is corrected, right? So the steps include basically elevation of the first metatarsal to bring the forefoot in line with the hind foot, and gradually over the period of next 3 or 4 casts, we bring the foot out as you can see in the video here, right? So as soon as we abduct the forefoot, you can see the heel, which was initially in varus, automatically unlocks itself and goes into valgus. This heel was initially in the varus, it has gone into valgus. Basically, it is locked under the talus in the clubfoot deformity, and as we move the foot outwards, you can see that the heel gradually moves out. Now, when we achieve this amount of abduction, this is the correct time to do a tendon tenotomy here, and this is how we stretch the foot up. So the last part of the deformity to be corrected here is the equinus. So these are the basic steps, the basic principles in the Ponseti, where to put the fingers, where not to put the fingers, and basically these correct most of these foot deformities. So we're going to the technique of casting, because we'll be going into the very practical details of management of a clubfoot. We are now going to the surgical part much. So before we start a casting procedure, we first stretch out, we manipulate the baby's foot for some time, for about a minute time. So that helps to relax the medial and the posterior structures of the ankle. And thereafter we need 2 or 3 assistants, one to hold the foot, the other to calm the baby. A single layer of cotton is applied, and this is how we gradually apply a 2-inch cast, right? So it's a very gentle procedure. There's a lot of finesse involved in manipulation, in casting of these babies, because their skin is extremely sensitive. If care is not taken to all of these steps, we can easily damage baby's skin, and we can lead to other deformities and an incorrected or a inappropriately corrected clubfoot. So we need to keep on molding. As you can see here, all the bony prominences have to be molded, the posterior part of the heel has to be molded. Continuous pressure should never be applied on the dorsum of foot at the point where we put our thumb, the talar head. It has to be a gentle pressure which we continuously keeps on molding. So that's how it is done, right? So this is the way to initially cast the baby on day 1. This is then cast applied in supination. So what we have done here is to elevate the first metatarsal. So this helps to correct the cavus part, right? So usually what happens is, after the first cast, the parents usually see the deformity has further increased. So yes, it does look to be increased, but as soon as we abduct the foot further in the subsequent cast, the deformity gradually corrects, right? So this is how the lower part of the cast is applied, right? So there are several steps of it. As you can see, the initial part corrected the deformity. Now we are just applying another layer to smoothen that part. So it's always an above knee cast. So the below knee part is applied first, we correct the foot part, we mold it well.
So once a properly molded plaster has been applied, it's important for the parent to understand that the child will remain fussy for first few days after the plaster application, and especially in cases where both the feet are involved and a bilateral Ponseti cast has been applied. So but usually they do well, and these kids usually need some observation for complications of plaster. The parent should understand that the toes of the kids should keep on moving, the limbs should be kept elevated while sleeping, the color of the toe should remain pink, there should be adequate circulation in the toes, that the child should be able to move the toes within the plaster, and the toe should not slide out of the plaster. That may indicate a loosening of the plaster. On the thigh part, there should not be any redness or erosion or the abrasion of the skin. So all that needs to be taken care of, and these kids usually are extremely compliant if the the due process of casting is maintained. So to summarize, this is how the deformity is corrected by sequential cast. As you can see, the deformity is usually severe in initial phase, and the foot is gradually brought out by sequential plasters, and finally a tenotomy is done, and which leads to an overcorrected foot of approximately 16 degrees of external rotation and around 15 to 20 degrees of dorsiflexion. So the foot is turned outwards and upwards. The earlier the correction is started, the fewer the number of casts which are required.